Hi, this is Jim Hewling, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Execution Insights, the podcast. Now, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. And for me, it's going to be deeply personal. You see, for most of my life, I've talked about leadership through the lens of execution and accountability and even purpose. And those have all been great topics. But lately, one word has continued to surface in all my reflection, and frankly, in all my conversations with leaders around the world, and even in my own quiet thoughts. And that word is joy. Now, not the kind that comes and goes, depending on the day. No, I'm talking about the deep, steady kind of joy that tells you that you're exactly where you're meant to be. And I've come to believe that joy isn't something we feel after we succeed. No, I believe joy is the source of our greatest success. And when we lose touch with it, well, everything else, even the things we once loved, can start to feel heavy and full of effort. In fact, to be completely transparent, there was a time in my life when I thought I had everything a leader could ever want. I was serving as CEO of a great company that I loved, and we were thriving financially, even recognized nationally for our culture and receiving awards for leadership and character. And gosh, from the outside, it looked like the pinnacle of achievement. But inside, what nobody knew was that I felt hollow. In fact, I remember one night in particular, I was sitting alone in my office long after everyone else had gone home. And out my window, I could see all the lights of the city where I lived, and they were glowing, in that special way that they do in the early part of the evening. And in that quiet moment, looking out that window, I realized something I had been avoiding for months. I'd achieved everything I thought I wanted, but somehow and somewhere along the way, I had lost the joy that once fueled me. In fact, that night taught me a truth I have never forgotten. External success can never fill an internal void. You see, fulfillment doesn't work from the outside in, it works from the inside out. And when you and I do work that's meaningful, and when our gifts and our purpose are aligned, well, fulfillment appears almost on its own. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you lead from a place of joy and alignment, success tends to follow. But when you chase external success, as though that were the goal, even your greatest victories can break your heart. And that experience, that night, changed me forever. In fact, it taught me that joy isn't something to be added at the end of the journey, but instead that joy is the source of a sustainable journey. And over the years, I've come to see that joy in leadership shows up in three places, maybe more powerfully than anywhere else. I want to share those with you today. The first is when you make a difference. Now, you don't need me to tell you that results matter. They do, and especially in a role of leadership. They are the price of entry. But real joy begins the moment you recognize that your leadership is also shaping a life. When you guide someone's growth, or when you see their confidence change, or when you celebrate the moment when it's their turn to lead. Now that's joy. The second is when you see greatness in others and you help them see it too. Most people don't recognize their own potential until someone like you or I calls it out. But I've seen many times that when a leader looks someone in the eye and says, "Hey, I see greatness in you, and I'm going to walk with you until you see it too," well, that's when something sacred happens. And third, maybe best of all, is when you realize that by doing what you're doing, you're actually building a legacy. Now, not a legacy of titles or awards or trophies or even financial achievement, but a legacy of people whose lives and leadership are better because you invested in them. That's the kind of joy that actually outlives us. Now, I want to really be clear. Joy never replaces results. Execution still matters. Results still matter. And frankly, they always will. But here's the key. Producing results is just the price of entry. It's not the purpose of leadership. And once you're in the arena, well, that's when the real work begins. Because leadership isn't defined by outcomes alone. Of course not. It's defined by how you achieve those outcomes. And when competence, like the type you try to bring every day, meets character, or you might say when execution meets empathy, or when results meet respect, well, leadership becomes far more than just a job or a performance. It becomes a legacy. It becomes real impact. It becomes, as we've said, joy. And that's what I really mean when I say joy is a valid compass. As leaders, we make countless decisions every day, right? About strategy and people and direction. And we analyze those decisions endlessly. And if you're like me, we measure cost and risk and ROI and timing and trade-offs and maybe a dozen other things. But there's one question we almost never stop to ask. Will doing this bring me joy? Now, I didn't say comfort or convenience or even applause or reward. I said joy, because joy is data too. Joy is feedback from the soul that says what you're doing is aligned with what truly matters. And I want to tell you that when we ignore it, when we override it, we can find ourselves in roles that look good on paper or from the outside, but every single day they are draining our spirit. So as an executive coach, I often tell leaders to put joy on the dashboard, not as a luxury, but as a real navigational tool. Because if you choose a path without joy, well, you won't be able to sustain it. And if you choose a path with joy, well, you'll bring a different kind of energy and presence and courage to all the work that you do. So if you want to start leading with more joy, here are 3 simple but powerful actions you can take starting today. First, call out greatness. I mean, literally, before this day ends, send a text, make a call, walk down the hall and tell at least one person that you see something in them. You'll be amazed at what that one sentence can unlock for them and, frankly, for you. Second, stay accountable for your results. Don't forget, execution still matters and results earn trust. In fact, as we've said, they create the platform that allows character and purpose and joy to actually thrive inside of an organization. And third and last, ask yourself one guiding question before every major decision. You've already heard me say it. Will this bring us joy? Not ease, not approval, but real joy. The joy that comes from alignment and purpose and doing what matters most. And please hear me when I say this. If the answer is no, pause, listen, reflect, go deep into your own heart and ask the question. Because pointing you toward truth, even when logic hasn't caught up to it yet, is how we find joy. I often tell the leaders I coach that the ultimate measure of a life well lived is simple. If you wake up in the morning with joy for what you're about to do, and you lay your head down at night with peace about what you've done, well, you found something incredibly rare and incredibly powerful. Joy in the morning, peace in the evening. I want to tell you that leadership doesn't get any better than that. And remember this, joy isn't the reward at the end of the journey. Joy is the compass that shows us the way. So thank you, my friends, for leading with heart and with courage and with joy, and for listening so carefully to this message. If this message resonated with you today, I want to make a small request. Share it with somebody else. We've never been in a time when joy was in shorter supply than it seems to be today, and when it was more needed for the healing and the health and the well-being of leaders and their teams. And as always, if you're looking for more insight, you can find it right here every single week on Execution Insights. So until the next time, keep leading with joy. It is truly a valid compass. And if you follow it, you won't lose your way. I'm Jim Hewling, and this is Execution Insights. I'll see you in the next episode.